We are super excited to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And so we are going to go through some case reviews, give you guys a little bit of our PVB background, and really go through how you can use your data for change. Next slide, please. And this is our overview. Like I just said, we're going to go through Illinois Perinatal Quality Collaborative, why NTSV, go through some of our data, and then kind of share some of our steps to do case review and share some of our strategies that hospitals have also shared with us. So ILPQC, we make change happen through 3 pillars. We have collaborative learning, rapid response data, and QI support. We use the IHI model for improvement when we do our quality improvement initiatives. So we do a lot of PDSA cycles with our teams. We make sure that we have aims, measures, and changes. And it's all based on the foundation of our hospital teams being involved, our community stakeholders, and of course, patients and families as well. Next slide, please. So just wanted to introduce our ILPQC Central team. We work with all of these wonderful people. We have Dan Weiss, who's our Director of Data and Operations. He really is key to help us when we are pulling our data from our REDCap system. We have Dr. Ann Borders, who is our Executive Director and OB Lead. We have Patty Lee King, who is our State Project Coordinator and Quality Lead. Ellie is there in the picture as well. And then we have 2 neonatal co-leads, Dr. Caldarelli and Dr. Justin Josephson. And then we also have a new team member, Alana. She is our project coordinator for our birth equity initiative that we also have in implementation.
All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, why we chose to focus on NTSV C-sections. So the reason we've decided to focus on NTSV and do this PVB initiative in Illinois, these patients are already kind of risk stratified. It's a standardized population that we can easily compare between providers, hospitals, and states. This population is the largest contributor to the recent rise in C-section rates, and it also exhibits the greatest variation for all cesarean births for both hospitals and providers. So it's the group that has the greatest, differences within hospitals, between hospitals, and so this was a really great group for us to focus on. And like you are modeling your initiative after ILPQC, we have modeled our initiative after other states. So the California Collaborative launched their initiative back in 2016. So you can see this graph on the right. They made huge gains in reducing their NTSV C-section rate throughout their active initiative, while the rest of the country was continuing to rise or stay, well above the goal. And so we have really leaned on California and taken a lot of their great expertise and learned a lot from them. And then Florida also had a similar initiative, and we used their data form and kind of adapted it for our data form, our case review form. And of course, we really rely on the national guidance. So from AIMS, so implementation of the AIM patient safety bundle. We are constantly reviewing the safe prevention of primary cesarean delivery, rereading it, making sure we're following that in every way that we can. And then also A1's expert opinion as well. And then we try to really make sure that we are bringing it back to the patients. We try to tell real patient stories, explaining why this work is so important. We're not just trying to reduce C-section rates, we're trying to reduce all the potential complications that can occur, at the C-section and in the future. So we actually had Kristen, who is here on the right, who had long-term complications of Accreta, present at one of our conferences and really make this more of a personal issue and explaining why we're really focusing on this. So our PVB initiative launched in December 2020. So we have been doing this for quite a while now. And our aim of our initiative is for greater than 70% of the hospitals participating. So we've got about 95 birthing hospitals in Illinois, and I think about 84 are currently participating in the PBB initiative. And our goal is for 70% of those hospitals participating to be at or below the Healthy People 2030 goal of 23.6 NTSB C-section rate. And we had our goal at 24.7, and then when the new 2030 goal came out, we changed it down to 23.6. And then greater than 70% of the NTSB C-sections that do occur are meeting ACOG SMFM criteria for cesarean. And we track that through the data collection and submission via REDCap. And then finally, 80% of physicians, midwives, and nurses educated on those ACOG SMFM criteria, making sure everyone is aware of it, constant re-education, education of, residents, any learners, new nurses, everything like that. And then these are the key strategies that we have identified for culture change. So we have developed this list across, the last 3 years. I think it took a lot of trial and error to really see what makes the biggest change. So the buy-in is constantly a struggle for our teams, getting teams to really understand why this is such an important initiative, why we're doing this work, getting everybody at the hospitals on board. So we offer grand rounds. We have Dr. Ann Borders come speak to teams. We try to really help as much as we can with that education. Sharing unblinded provider level NTSB C-section rates. This is a strategy we learned from California. They've done a really great job of encouraging their hospitals to share these unblinded dates and rates, and it has been really helpful for our teams that have been able to do so, for providers to know their rates, know how they compare to other providers at their hospital or within their group or whatever they choose. The fallout reviews, so the case reviews that of the cases that do not meet ACOG SMFM criteria have been very helpful for teams to understand how they can focus, and that's what we're going to talk about more. Labor management support is really important. Our nurses have been super excited to get involved with Spinning Babies and other organizations doing labor management support. Making sure patients are educated, participating in their decision-making, and then having a delivery decision huddle and checklist. So making sure that every time this decision is being made, we're reviewing that criteria and everything. And we just wanted to share with you some of our key resources. So these are all in our ILPQC PBB toolkit, which you can find on our website. So we're going to talk about this missed opportunity review. So understanding why C-sections aren't meeting criteria, what could be done differently. We created these provider education posters to put around the unit just as a reminder, so that they're constantly seeing these criteria and reminders for all of that. And then the unblinding provider data, California has a really great step-by-step guide of how to unblind that data and what to do with it, how to approach this process, because it can be kind of difficult to get people on board with this. And then we have a cesarean decision checklist, which we've actually kind of renamed as delivery decision checklist, because we want it to be, not an assumption that a C-section is happening before we even pull out the checklist. So this just has the criteria. And then we also have these labor management e-modules that we created. So we had Jessica Brumley, who's a midwife in Florida, come and do a virtual labor management support. It was during COVID, so we weren't able to do anything in person, but we really wanted our teams to be able to get some great education. And then she gave a live class and we recorded it and broke it down into these e-modules. So they're on YouTube and they're available to the public. And she does a really good job of explaining, why these positions are helpful, the, anatomy and physiology of labor and everything, so that teams can really understand, why they're doing all these crazy positions and stuff during labor. So those are all in our toolkit and it's all available to the public. And so we just wanted to share some of our progress of our PBB initiative, so you can kind of see where our journey has gone and how we've kind of focused our work. So this is as a state overall. You can see here we have our C-section rate is the blue line, and then the green is the percent of hospitals that are achieving the goal. So we had some really great progress throughout our first year of our initiative. You can see by the end of 2021, we had half of our teams achieving the goal. We were well on our way. And then we had Delta and Omicron, and teams, really started to struggle to focus on this work when there was so much else going on in their hospitals with staffing issues and everything. So it definitely was a little bit of a struggle. Our C-section rate as a state went up and the percent of hospitals achieving the goal went down. So, but we've really been able to get back on track and keep our C-section rate as a state below goal, but we still have not quite achieved our goal of having 70% of hospitals achieving the NTSB C-section rate goal. And we originally were looking at our C-sections by indication. So we had cesarean after induction, labor dystocia, fetal heart rate concerns. So you can see that, you know, we made really good progress throughout the initiative of improving the percent of C-sections after induction. So that was any patient coming in for an induction, and then any patient with a labor dystocia that had come in labor. But what we realized was this wasn't that helpful in terms of how to look at, you know, what to focus on, because once a induction is kind of in active labor, then they're, you know, is it really as relevant that they're in induction in terms of looking at the data? So if you can go to the next slide, you can see how we started, excuse me, how we started to look at the data instead. So instead we looked at it by stage of labor. And this is where we were really able to see the differences. And we saw that failed induction is actually where we needed to focus the most. And this is where teams realized that they need to focus the most, because they have access to these kind of graphs on their hospital level. So they can see how they're comparing to the rest of the state, the hospitals with similar perinatal level and birth volume, and then their own C-section or meeting criteria, as well as their C-section rate. So we found by breaking it down by stage of labor instead of, you know, original indication, was that we really needed to work on failed induction, and we really needed to work on second stage arrest. And we've done a really great job in Illinois. Our teams have done a really great job of improving the percent of second stage arrests that are meeting criteria, but we definitely still have work to be done on failed induction. So that's kind of what we're focusing on now. But changing how we looked at the data ended up being really helpful to understand where we needed to focus. And we spent a lot of time on second stage arrest in 2021 and 2022, and then that's how we were able to improve that rate. And then we also have recently started looking at our C-section rate by race and ethnicity. We've got two graphs here. So this is Black versus white patients. So you can see that we had some pretty big disparities to start out through, you know, into 2022. We really had a significantly higher rate of Black patients ending up with C-sections than white patients. But through the last year, as we've started to focus on this and talk about it more, we've started to see that disparity come down, and the rates are now very similar. And then this is a graph with Black, white, Hispanic, and others. So you can kind of see the disparities have kind of varied over time, but throughout our initiative, as we've been working on this as a whole, they've started to, you know, reduce. And then in the next slide, we have this really great material that Alana created. So, you know, we don't want to just look at the data, we want to figure out what to do next. So now hospitals also have any graphs that we show, hospitals have access to like their own graph of their data. So they're able to identify the disparities on their specific unit, you know, what can they do to get input from their patients, engage, educate, and improve, and then connecting with their clinical team. So making sure this information isn't just staying within the, you know, PVB team, the QI team, but making sure we're getting this information out to the whole unit. Yeah. I think Alana is up next.
All right. So now to the reason why we're here is to go through a case review process. And so I kind of put on my old hat of being a promoting vaginal birth lead at the hospital level and kind of thought through how I would do collecting data. So I have kind of three things to focus on. We're going to focus on data, the actual data collection, reviewing the data with your team, and then how we can use that data to focus our QI work. So the first step is data collection. And so this is our patient level data form. I know you guys have your own, but what we had teams do is they were to select 20 patient charts a month and then go through their EMR system and collect specific things. So we have demographics, delivery, the outcomes of both the birthing person and neonate, and then if the use of shared decision-making, the decision checklist, and the huddles were being used. And then how Ellie described in the data, we also broke it down into 3 categories. So cesarean after induction, the labor dystocia, and then fetal heart rate concerns. And then one thing that I believe is different is that we also had teams collect 10 vaginal deliveries as well, so that we can do a comparison as well. So some of the things that I think about, and I want you guys to think about as you start to dive into this data, is really making sure that you understand the form. I'm not sure how you guys are going to do it, but one thing that I did is I would print out the form and do a test run. And so what I mean by that is there's a lot of things being asked on the data form. And so you want to make sure that you have a good standardized process to be able to pull that information. We have face sheets. That's how I would get like the demographic information. But the other thing that you also want to make sure is that the demographics are being reported correctly. A lot of our hospital teams have patients pre-register, and so that information is taken from that. But then there are also hospital teams that have patients that register on site. So think about a patient that's in labor and they're filling out this information, is that's going to be accurate as if they were not in labor and they had pre-registered. So things to think about for the demographic part. The other thing is how you pull data from your charts in your EMR system. I'm not sure what you guys have in Arkansas, but in the state of Illinois, we have, I think, 3 or 4 different EMR systems. We have Epic and Cerner and Meditech, and then there's another one. So you really want to make sure that you can understand your EMR system and how you're going to pull the data. The biggest thing for data collection is your data champion. So when you get your teams together, as we've learned right now that you guys are doing in the process, who is going to be the person pulling all of this data? And I have here get creative, because I was the nurse educator and I was the one that was pulling all of that information. When I became a part of the ILPQC team, I learned that other hospitals were doing it differently. Some people were using nursing students, some people are using residents and using that as their project. And so you really want to make sure that you have a data champion and that it is a standardized process, so that when one person's pulling it and another person pulls it, they're pulling the same data. The other thing is that you want to make sure you're collaborating with your IT team and or your quality team. This is something that I learned, lessons learned. I was manually pulling all of the data, going line by line. A year after pulling all of that, I learned that our IT and quality team was actually pulling the same data and reporting it to our quality and safety department meetings. And so then a year later, I was able to use those same reports that had the specific data. And it made my life so much easier. And it was just an awesome report that spit everything out. I would put it on the data form and then I would submit it to REDCap. So these are my tips. So make sure you have a QI data champion on your team, really understand your data form at each of the sections and what they're asking for, and then making sure you collaborate with your IT and quality safety team. All right, and so then step 2 is really reviewing the data with your team. And so as Ellie had shared, this is our PVB focus for 2023, making sure that our teams are below the 23.6% NTSB C-section rate. We are focusing on the ACOG SMFM criteria. For 2023, the big focus is on failed inductions and second stage arrest, and then identifying and addressing disparities. So we wanted to really share this tool that we created for one of our annual events that happened last year. We call this our PVB Fallout Review Form. And so this is a great tool to use after you submit your data and you start to review case by case, which ones are not meeting ACOG SMFM guidelines. And so this is literally something that a QI team member can use, and you can figure out what happened in that case. This is a great tool also to provide feedback to your clinical team. So for example, if you're noticing that failed induction is one of the criteria that keep meeting high and they're not meeting criteria, you can literally just focus on question 1, was cervical ripening used? So this is an opportunity to see if maybe education needs to be provided on Bishop score, or maybe you need to revamp your induction policy. So this is just kind of a tool to start your path on understanding why cases are not meeting criteria. We wanted to also share these process flows that we created, and it's available in our toolkit as well. For each of the criterias as well, we have induction here. And so it's just a better visual to see of a pathway on were ACOG SMFM criteria met, yes or no, and then you can follow it along there. And then it's really awesome, I think, that we have this, because when I used it with our teams, it was great to pull up on a PowerPoint in a room, and then we would discuss the cases together using these different pathways. So you can see here, this one's for induction. If you go to the next one, we have the next 2 as well. And again, I know it looks really small right now, but we are happy to share these with you guys, and you can use them as you go through your case reviews as well. Next one. And then this one's fetal heart rate concerns. So we wanted to just kind of break down a little bit that fallout review form for you guys. Again, we just really want you to understand that breaking down case by case is really important. So if ACOG SMFM criteria were not met, what were the possible reasons? And so this goes back to our key strategies that Ellie had shared. We really want to go back and focus on different areas. So we can go back and see, was a checklist not utilized? Was a decision huddle not performed? Was there an alternate indication or reason? And then documentation of indication was not clear. So this is really eye-opening. You'll start to learn who is really good at documenting and who is not. I use this as an opportunity as an educator to really educate on documentation and the importance of it. The way that you're going to grab all of this information when you do these case reviews is by documentation. And so I learned kind of the hard way for the beginning of this is that providers were documenting it somewhere else and nurses were documenting it at a different location. And so once you figure out where they're documenting it, then you can educate on a standardized process so that it can make it easier to pull this data. So when you're reviewing this, this is something that you also want to bring back to your QI team and say, okay, this is the next step. This is our 30-day plan that we need to educate everyone on better documentation, or we can educate our staff on using the checklist or shared decision-making or whatever it might be. So this is why we broke it down to simplify it a little bit more. And then this just breaks down to another reason, which is shared decision-making. And again, going back to our documentation, we use a lot of EPIC. We call them, what are they called? Smart phrases. Yeah, the smart phrases where we really share within our hospital teams what one hospital is doing on EPIC compared to another. And so we learned that on the provider side, after you do your shared decision-making at the bedside, there is a standardized sentence that you can put on there. But it took us a little bit of time to learn that. And so this is just showing how you can improve the process of decision-making, shared decision-making, and if it's documented or not. And then the last 2 here, if it wasn't documented, this is something to circle back with your providers, your nurses, and your bedside clinical team caring for the patient. And again, this is just another sheet, part of the sheet to provide feedback as you're going through it with your QI team about additional information about decision-making. So with all that being said, some of the things that we want to focus on are using our data to focus our QI work. And so the next slide here shows some of the things that we've been learning from our hospital teams. Ellie and I have been doing a lot of one-on-one QI support calls with our hospital teams. As Ellie shared, we are in our 3rd year of our initiative. And so we're really working with teams to learn what strategies they need support with and how we can help that. And so we also are learning a lot, as you saw in our pillars, collaborative learning, the things that are working really well for them. And so we want to share that with you guys right now. So after a team does, go back real quick. After a team does their case review, they enter their data and they review it with their QI team. The things that are really important is that you go back to your clinical team and you really involve them and provide them feedback. Sometimes when we get into these big QI initiatives, we've learned that the QI team is doing all of the work, which is great, but then they're not circling back to the clinical team that's doing the actual work with the patient at the bedside. And so we really want you guys to learn from our lessons and learn to bring feedback and involve the clinical team either at OB department meetings, at nurse meetings, or at unit meetings. If you have like a quality and safety meeting, that's also another opportunity to bring it up to. And then also your policies, you'll be really surprised on how much policy plays a role in all of this with our Promoting Vaginal Birth initiative. You start to look at your, of course, induction policy and your Pitocin policies. And so really bringing the feedback of the clinical team is important. And then the other thing is looking at your ACOG SMFM criteria, what patterns do you see with your data? So one thing that we started to notice with our teams is that we can start to focus education based on our fallout review cases. And so Ellie shared our labor management support e-modules that are free and available on our toolkit. We also learned that with fetal heart rate concerns, people can start doing strip reviews. I don't know if that is required in your hospitals, but it is required in the state of Illinois. And so strip reviews, not only just with nurses, but with the whole clinical team. You might have a little bit of downtime for 5-10 minutes at the nurses station. And so that's a great opportunity to just pull up a quick strip and have everybody put in their thoughts on it and then do a quick strip review. Again, it's all about bringing awareness to the unit and using the same language when you review your strips. And then this is something we learned from another hospital team is focusing one-on-one support with specific clinical team members. We had a hospital that would have a OB provider champion, and they would coach other providers that were had higher rates of their NTSV C-sections. And so they had a coaching model going on within the hospital unit. And then we also had a lot of nurse champion leads that were leading the projects on their unit. And so what that meant is that they would go to spinning babies and they would bring back all of that information and they would lead on their unit by sharing it with other nurses, being the champion on the unit and calling them, say, hey, I have a patient that's stuck at, can we figure out some positions to do this with? They would do bulletin boards and recognition on their units as well. And so really involving the clinical team is key to really focusing your QI work. And so I just wanted to end on this quote, find a group of people who challenge and inspire you, spend a lot of time with them, and it will change your life. As we dig deeper into QI work, I really have found my people with QI and really challenging and inspiring. And I hope that you guys have a really successful launch, and we are excited to support you and your teams.